Well, good day, good morning, whenever you're watching this. We are studying Esther chapter 8 today. My name is Zach Mason, if you're not familiar with me. And on these live videos, a lot of the time, what we're doing is just going verse by verse through a chapter of the Bible when we can get through a whole chapter. Esther's been a very interesting book, and I believe that it is prophetically connected to events that are happening today as well in our world, as it's a shadow and a type of the ongoing battle between Persian authorities, Amalekites, and the Jewish people, which we're seeing acted out in front of us as in the hostilities between Iran and Hezbollah and other groups in Israel. But before we get into the chapter, though, we need to pray. Let's go ahead and pray. Father in heaven, thank you for who you are. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your word. Lord, your word is incredible. It never returns void, Father. You deserve all the honor and glory. We pray, Father, that we can honor you and glorify you as we study your word together. I pray that you would reward us for seeking you and seeking to know you by allowing us to know you, by allowing us to draw closer to you in your presence, Father, and to be healed of infirmities and weaknesses and strengthened by your Spirit, Father. In Jesus Christ's name we pray and trust. Amen. Okay. So, where we left off, if you were with me in chapter 7 yesterday, is we've had quite the turn of events in this book, and God has orchestrated justice in only the way that God can do it, through providentially moving certain pieces around at just the right time. There was a wicked man named Haman who was a descendant of King Agag of the Amalekites, who was in the Persian Empire. Vashti, the first queen, had been removed for her pride. Esther, a young Jewish girl, has been elevated for her beauty and poise and grace and humility to the position of queen. King Ahasuerus of the Persian Empire fell in love with her. She's been made queen. Haman, though, was made the king's second in command, or over all of his chief of staff, basically. Chief chancellor over all the Persian officials. Mordecai was also a king's official who was sitting in the king's gate, and he had warned the king of an assassination attempt a few years earlier, or sometime earlier, by a couple of eunuchs. Mordecai would never bow to Haman. Haman hated the Jews because of this is one more affront to him to cause him to hate the Jewish people. And he devised a plan to eliminate the Jewish people. And he got the king kind of happy and drunk and got him to agree to a decree that they could send out to the entire empire, allowing anyone who wanted to kill the Jews and take their possessions for themselves to be able to do that with legal authority on the 13th day of Adar, which is the last day of the Hebrew month. This year it came in March of our year. So this was a big stress for the Jewish people, of course, seeing that this was coming months away. Mordecai asked Esther to intervene. She was, not sure at first, but she did. She went to the king, set up a couple of banquets she invited Haman to in order to expose what he was doing to the king. The king did not know that Queen Esther was Jewish. But then, as only God can, he wouldn't let Ahasuerus sleep the night between the two banquets. And he inspired Ahasuerus to go read the old chronicles of the happenings of their government, and he remembered about Mordecai warning him about the assassination attempt, and he asked, what's been done for this man to honor him? And the official said, nothing's been done. He said, Oh no, who's here in the palace right now? Who's in the outer court? Said Haman's just come in. Now everybody knew Haman had just come in because he just finished building a gallows to hang Mordecai from. But the king wants to honor Mordecai. He doesn't know what Haman wants to do, because Haman hasn't opened his mouth yet. The king says, Haman, what should the king do to honor a man he wishes to honor? And Haman's like, oh, he must be talking about me. By all means, put him on a royal horse, put a royal robe on him, have one of your most top guys walk around the city just proclaiming honor and, to him. And the king said, great idea. Do every single thing you said to Mordecai. You go take him around. You put the royal robe on him. And of course, Haman was mortified. He's upset. He had to do it. And then before he's even had time to process, he's getting pulled back to the next banquet where Queen Esther tells the king, hey, it's Haman who wants to kill me and all my people. You didn't know I was Jewish. And the king is furious and he hangs Haman. See, only God can intervene whenever he wants, in whatever way he wants. Things can seem to be going a certain way with government leaders or whoever that seem immovable. It seems like nothing can change. Nothing can be done about this situation. And then God just gives them a dream. Or he doesn't let them sleep. Or he just inspires someone to say something stupid to them. Or he caused someone to trip and a folder flies out and secret papers go all over the place that the wrong person sees. God can do a million things. More than a million, honestly. But he is always in control. And he's the master chess player. So that is where we left off, chapter 7. In chapter 8, verse 1, it says, on that day, the same day that Haman was hung, the same day of the second banquet, the same day of Mordecai being honored, King Ahasuerus gave Queen Esther the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. So she's finally said, yeah, this is my adoptive father. He's like my cousin, but he's also my adopted father. So the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed Mordecai over the house of Haman. So, basically, this is quite a big deal. The signet ring is very significant, right? It's a ring that has a very specialized design that only the king has, and only the king is allowed to have. And when he issues an order, if it's on a clay tablet, then the person with his signet ring would impress his seal into the tablet. Or if it's a scroll or something like that, then they'd put wax and they'd put his seal on that. And that seal with his design meant the king himself has authorized this. And but if it didn't have that, it couldn't be considered official. So only a few people will have a copy of this ring. They have to be very trusted people because they can do things in the king's name, right? So, from the people's perspective, just the general population of the capital city of Susa or Shusan, they probably would not have had an awareness of the banquet, the role of the banquet in the change of events. It would have seemed like one fluid thing. The first thing they know in the morning is this nobody Mordecai is riding around in a royal robe, royal horse, led by Haman, and Haman is proclaiming honor to him and telling everybody, look at Mordecai, the king wants to order Mordecai. And then within hours after that, Haman, the second in command, is hanging from the gallows himself. the signet ring is taken off of Haman's fingers by the king. Then it's given to Mordecai, and Mordecai is given ownership of Haman's house and all his property, Haman's palace and all his properties, which means his wife and everybody would have had to move out, etc. So from the people's perspective, it would have seemed like it was just the whole flow of the day. That's how it was going. And they might not have even realized that there had been no plan to hang Haman early in the day, that he wasn't being dishonored necessarily by the king then. He was just trying to honor Mordecai, and the banquet flipped it so that Haman lost his life very quickly. So basically, Mordecai is being given Haman's position. He's becoming second in command over the Persian Empire in Haman's place. Quite the turn of events. Why would the king do this? Well, his relationship to Esther, he loves Esther, which means he can trust Mordecai even more. Esther has not shown any political ambition. She's not trying to get him to do things. She said, I wouldn't even bother you if I was going to be sold into slavery. It was only because I was going to be killed that I bothered you. There's no scheming in this woman, and so he trusts her implicitly. And so he trusts Mordecai. Mordecai also saved his life. So he's gotten, the man that you want in that position is someone you can trust completely. But it is interesting to me that in verse 2 it says, Esther appointed Mordecai over the house of Haman, which means the palace, his properties, his fields, and it also means any of his slaves or servants. Now Esther spoke again to the king, fell down at his feet, and implored him with tears to counteract the evil of Haman the Agagite and the scheme which he had devised against the Jews. And the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king. So see, if you don't pay attention, and you're just reading through this quickly, you don't really feel it or see the difference in dates or times or things like that. But this was a long day, the first day, the day of the banquet. In the book, the chapter here opens with, on that same day that Haman was hung, Mordecai was given the ring, and Esther appointed him over the house of Haman. But then verse 3 is a different day. And how do we know? Because she was already in the king's presence on the day of the banquet, already speaking with him. They were putting Mordecai in place. It was a long day. There was a lot to do. But now we're seeing that she's coming to him and falling at his feet and imploring him again about this. So it's not the same day, because he's having to hold out the golden scepter once more. And if he didn't do that, it meant that she was going to die, because it meant she came into his presence without being invited. So verse 3 is definitely a different day. How many days later? We don't know. It probably wasn't necessarily the next day. I think there's some time between them. They're probably, her and Mordecai have been speaking and wondering, is this decree still going to be in place? How can we undo it? So Esther arose and stood before the king, because he held out the golden scepter, and said, if it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seems right to the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes. Okay, so she, again, all these intros, very polite, very supplicative. King, if you would like to do this, if I have any kind of favor with you, and if this thing seems like it's just, then I'm going to ask. And if I'm pleasing, and if you think I'm beautiful, almost as the last one, if I'm pleasing in your eyes, if you see me and you are happy to see me, let it be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to annihilate the Jews who are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that will come to my country, to my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my countrymen? So, um, her approach is, hey, king, can we please just revoke these decrees that went out? Can you just send out another decree and say, hey, never mind, don't do that? And her motivation, she says, King, I've realized that I'm safe now and Mordecai is safe, but how can I bear to see my people killed? Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and Mordecai the Jew, indeed, I have given Esther the house of Haman. So that's why Esther was able to appoint Mordecai over the house of Haman, because he gave it to Queen Esther. You know, he had visually seen Haman attacking her in his eyes. It says, and they have hanged him on the gallows because he tried to lay his hand on the Jews. So he says, look, this has already happened to Haman. Haman was killed because he wanted to hurt the Jews. So let's do the same thing on a grand scale. You yourselves write a decree concerning the Jews, as you please, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's signet ring. So he's basically saying, he's not going to write this thing. He's basically authorizing Esther and Mordecai to write whatever decree they want to write to help the Jews and to sign it with his signet ring. And then he says, for whatever is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's signet ring, no one can revoke. So, two things. One, he is basically suggesting a strategy to them without violating this rule they had of there's this rule, and I believe we see this in Daniel as well, that in the Persian Empire, when the king issued a decree, it could not be revoked. There was no undoing a law of the Medes and the Persians once it was in place. You had to write a new law to modify it or weaken it or something like that. So this is what he's suggesting. He's saying, hey, Haman wanted to hurt the Jews, but we hung him before he could do it. So why don't we do the same thing around the rest of the provinces? And I'm not only am suggesting this, I'm trusting you to write it however you want. They could have really written something nasty. So the king's scribes were called at that time. Who called them? Mordecai. He's in charge. In the 3rd month, which is the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day. So this had been, I don't know, I guess summertime for us. Still a good 9 months away from the dirty day. On the 23rd day, and it was written, the 23rd day of Sivan, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Jews, the satraps, the governors, and the princes of the provinces, from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces in all, to every province in its own script, to every people in their own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. So there are people from every people group in among the king's scribes who speak Persian. And so they're translating it and writing it in their own script. So this would have been Arabic-looking letters, Hebrew letters, Ethiopic, Sanskrit, of course, Persian. So every alphabet style, script, and every language. And to the liberal historians who don't want to admit the historicity of this book, you know, when you see things like terms like it's specifying that this command went to the Jews, to the satraps, the governors, and the princes of the provinces, It's detail that wouldn't be there in a legend. It's not just saying the governors. It's specifying 3 levels of authority. This is like saying this went out to um, it's like saying this went out to the governors of the states, the chairman, the county chairman of the counties, and the mayors of the cities. It's like that. But it also specifies that the order went to the Jews themselves. So they sent it not just in every province. They didn't just send it just to the actual governing officials of the province, but they sent it to the next level up and the next level up. And then they sent a separate copy to every Jewish community in case there were government officials that wanted to withhold it from them. So they're being very thorough. And he wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, sealed it with the king's signet ring, and sent letters by couriers on horseback, riding on royal horses bred from swift steeds. So he's signing it with King Ahasuerus' name, sealing it with his ring. They're getting royal horses to send this message. So this is going to be viewed as a very important message. You're not going to waste royal horses and have them distributed out in the province at risk of their well-being over a minor communication. So this is going to be seen as a major, significant communication. And they're swift horses. So speed, the name of the game is speed. There's no delay on this. By these letters, the king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together and protect their lives. So he's saying, Jews, you can form militias to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people or province that would assault them, both little children and women, and to plunder their possessions. So, that language, this we're going to see that the Jews are not going to take the possessions of their attackers. So that language of little children and women and plunder their possessions is repeating the language from the original decree that Haman wrote. Haman wrote, it's okay to assault the Jews, kill their women, kill their kids, and take their possessions. So it's saying that this letter is authorizing the Jews to form militias, to protect themselves, and to destroy, kill, and annihilate anyone who would try to act consistently with the first decree that Haman did. On one day in the provinces of King Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is in the month of Adar. So they're saying you can defend yourselves on this day. On that day that they're going to try to do this to you, you can form militias that same day and defend yourselves. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province and published for all people, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So they're not going to go out and just hear rumors, oh, this group is going to do this on this day, and then they're preemptively going to kill them. No, they have to wait for the day to see who's actually going to rise up to do something. But then the Jews can have their militias ready, their weapons ready. They've got 9 months to buy weapons and prepare. And then they can defend themselves that day. The couriers who rode on royal horses went out, hastened and pressed on by the king's command. And the decree was issued in Shushan the citadel. So the couriers went out on the royal horses, and they were racing to get this decree out. And the decree started in Shushan, but it went out to all the provinces. That's what that line means. Now, why didn't Mordecai and Esther, why didn't they act more harshly? Why didn't they write a decree that would allow the Jews to do more? I mean, they could have easily written it to say, Jews form militias, and before the 13th of Adar, if you hear of anybody plotting to do this against you, that you can kill them before that day. Why didn't they do something like that? Well, I think Mordecai and Esther were acting in wisdom. They haven't been very pushy with the king. They weren't aggressive in their ambition like Haman was. So, in wisdom, they knew that if they had done that, what would happen? Well, there would have been some bad news, some unfortunate news coming in from somewhere. That the Jewish people had taken this somewhere and run with it, and they'd massacred some people, and those people hadn't even done anything, and how did they have the right to do this? And this was a problem. Those people would come and complain to the king, and in the end, the king would have said, well, I did tell you you could write what you want, but there would have been a little stench in his nose about the whole affair. And they didn't want that. They did not want the king regretting that he let them do this. They did not want to lose his favor. So, they're basically doing it in the most just way possible and saying, wait for the day, be ready, you got time to prepare, and you only attack those people who are attacking you, actually attacking you. So, Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, with a great crown of gold and a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. Okay, so Mordecai is like going out from the presence of the king. When he travels in Shushan, he's going in a robe of blue and white, which reminds me of the colors of Israel today. But symbolically, it's the colors of righteousness and of God. And is indicating he's a man of God. He's got a crown of gold, which associates him very strongly with royalty. Like Daniel and like Joseph, he's been elevated to be second in command. This always happens because God's people always rise to the top. The garment is made of fine linen, which is a very expensive garment, and purple is a very expensive color. The only place in the ancient world you could get purple dye was from a certain type of mollusk, and so it was a very expensive color of fabric. It isn't like today where you just go and you just take your pick and you can get any color you want anytime. No, this was very hard to get purple, and so purple was the color of royalty. So he is being honored as royalty. And I almost say that there's an image here of the Messiah, of Christ. Remember, Mordecai, his name means bitter oppression. Jesus went through bitter oppression, through the torture and whipping and the spitting and the mocking and then the cross. And there's no color red on Mordecai. Red is the color of man. So this is a very good picture of the Messiah. Blue, white, gold, and purple. Those are the colors of the Messiah. This is an image of him. And it's almost like as Mordecai's bitter oppression is being raised into royalty and clothed in royalty. So the Lamb of the God who was slaughtered before the foundation of the world has become the Lion of Judah and will reign. It's the very same symbolism. The city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. So they're glad means happy. So they're shouting and rejoicing, and they're just generally laughing and full of mirth and happiness. This verse is interesting, verse 16. The Jews had light and gladness, joy, and honor. So, again, this is like one of those verses you just read it. Yeah, the Jews had light and gladness, joy, and honor. And you kind of read it like, yeah, they had good things. But why those four words? I like to stop and say, what if this isn't just repeated language? What does each one mean? Well, between gladness and joy, there is a slight difference. Joy is like this rejoicing, this very emotional, shouting and happiness and etc. Like a team, uh, fans of a sports team in the streets rejoicing when their team wins a championship. Gladness is similar, but it's referring more to just mirth and laughter and just general happiness over something. The honor is different in that it means that others honored them. They might even been bringing, typically honor has to do with giving gifts, honoring someone with a gift of money or something else. So the indication is that the people of Shushan were now honoring the Jews, not wanting to kill them, but this decree has gone out and it's making the people of the entire empire realize the king favors the Jews. So if we want the king's favor, we need to favor the Jews. The queen is Jewish. We need to favor the Jews. The second in command over the Persian Empire is Jewish. We need to honor the Jews. Okay. So they would have done favorable business deals with them, among other things. And that's what that is meaning. And this is referring to the Jews in Shushan, the capital city. The first one is the most interesting to me. It says the Jews had light, but it's not the exact same word as a normal word for light. It's the word for light in Hebrew is or, and in the Genesis 1:3, when God said, "Let there be light," he just says or. But this says the Jews had orah, which is probably related to our English word aura. But aura is a weaker light. It's not like sun, direct sunshine. And the meaning isn't super clear, but it seems to be referring to like evening light, moonlight, that kind of thing. And so it's kind of a curious word, and I'm not sure why is it here? Why are they saying the Jews had evening light and gladness and joy and honor? I had a thought that it could be well, symbolically, if we're going to interpret this as just kind of conceptually or emotionally, like we would gladness, joy, and honor, it can mean like there's a dawning of light for them, like they were in this darkness of night where they thought they were going to be killed, and now they have some light, a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. But I wondered if there wasn't a very different meaning. What if it is referring to, in ancient cities, some neighborhoods would have lampposts where lamplighters would come around and they would light the lampposts in the city so you'd have city street lights during the evening. And those lights wouldn't be lit all night. They would just put a new candle and light them in the evening. Well, this was a service that cost money. And so I just wondered if perhaps this was meaning the Jews had evening light, which meant that they were being honored now. And so the neighborhoods where they lived, they were receiving street lights at night in the evening. Doesn't seem like a big deal to us, but would have been to them. And that might be what it's saying. I'm not sure. And in every province and city, wherever the king's command and decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a holiday. Okay, so in the rest of the provinces, there's no mention of light and there's no mention of honor, which again is making me think gifts and street lights. But they did have joy and gladness. And then they had a feast and a holiday. They're having a big celebration about this. Then many of the people of the land became Jews, because fear of the Jews fell upon them, which backs up what I'm saying about the honor, about people saying, hey, Mordecai's a Jew, Queen Esther's a Jew, the king sent this decree to favor the Jews. The Jews are what's up, so I'm going to be Jewish. Can I become Jewish? And so many of the people of the land, not all, many of the people of the land became Jews, which means they had to get baptized. Yes, because baptism wasn't invented by John the Baptist. Baptism was a ritual that the Jews had for a pagan, for a non-Jew, non-Israelite, to become Jewish, to die to their old self and rise as a new creation as a Jew. And so they would have had to do that. But the tides have definitely turned, and the Jews are in favor. Anyways, that is Esther chapter 8. I hope it's been informative, helpful to you. I think that overall, we should be just trusting God. Trusting God to provide for us, to protect us, to lift us up, and really study his word with passion, because there's so much in it for our benefit. And anyways, you guys have a great day, and we'll see you soon.